Hello there, I'm Dominic St-Pierre, and you're listening to Go Podcast. And yes, it means that this podcast is back. Hello, Gophers. So I will quickly start by stating a little bit, talking a little bit about the state of the podcast. So what happened lately? You might have noticed that I haven't posted any episode in the last, I would say probably maybe almost 2 months now, close to that. In last December, I reached out the third full years of Go Podcast. So even though the episode number is kind of low for 3 years, I always, kind of feel a little bit like the imposter syndrome and whatnot, and prevent me from doing some episodes when I don't have anything really interesting to say, or things like that, or things I think that might be not really worth it. So yeah, I mean, long story short, this is still I'm starting the fourth year of the Go Podcast. I was wondering if where I was exactly with all of this, even though I've really enjoyed all the creation and things like that, and meeting all the people that I interview and things like that. This is the fun part, but it's a lot of work. I won't lie, it's a lot of work to schedule meetings and try to reach people out, and all of that, all the preparation and things like that. But I still enjoy. I was unsure. So my yearly subscription to my podcast hosting kind of ended in December, and I canceled. I announced on BlueSky. I'm not on Twitter anymore, by the way, but I said that on BlueSky that I was thinking about potentially stopping Go Podcast and whatnot. So yeah, about 1 month in 2025, so near February 1st, basically the last week of January, I was starting to debate again the potential to kind of resume doing the episode and try to see where I could go. So maybe one path that I will try to do for at least the next year with the pod. I will of course continue to try and bring guests as much as I can, because I do love the interview. I think that the listeners also enjoy that, but it's not always possible for me to bring guests. It's just difficult. But I also want to have a more regular cadence. I would like to post one episode per week if I can. And for that, I will need to have a lot of things to say. So I was wondering, maybe when I don't have any guests line up, what I could do is talk about a project that I would be doing. So something big enough to be interesting, of course, in Go, and just try to see if I can extract as much as possible interesting bits from the development of that thing that might relate to listeners, to people interested in Go, people that are also building things in Go that might also face that kind of thing. So it's a little bit vague at the moment, but I don't know. I'm still thinking about that. The bottom line is that I'm resuming the podcast now. So the domain name is back online. So gopodcast.dev is back. The the RSS feed for the podcast is back again, so I don't know. I don't think it went down because when my podcast hosting subscription canceled, I set up a 301 redirect to something I was hosting myself, just to have the RSS feed, the podcast RSS feed to stay alive. So hopefully, you still have all the subscription to the pod in your podcast listening tool and whatnot. So that's the goal for the next year. I will try to post a little bit more often. We'll try to reach out as much as possible. Again, if if any one of you wants to come and talk to me, that would be great. Just reach out. I'm very approachable, I think. I like to talk with all sorts of people, and people that are doing interesting thing in Go is always great to have. If you know someone that could be interested into talking to this podcast, even though I think I kind of created something niche in the I'm of course there's Go Time that I think stopped in January as well. I don't know. I think I saw that pass. I viewed that on BlueSky, but did not really read anything or things like that. I'm a little bit guilty of admitting that I was not listening to Go Time podcast very often. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I think it's stopped and things like that. But so even though I don't have thousands and thousands of listeners, I think we have built something unique in here in our very own corner of the Go community, and I'd like to continue to do that. So hopefully I will be able to grab regular guests and things like that. We will see. So one thing led to another. Let's talk about tests a little bit. So I was doing some unit tests the other day, and I realized how well. First of all, we all know about the importance of tests, of course. For me, it's always like, well, again. I'm not sure if I will go with the title for this pod that I have in mind, but might be a little bit clickbaity-ish, which is something like, ultimately I kind of hate or dislike my test in Go, but let me explain that a little bit, because it's not really true. I mean, anything that relates to unit tests is fairly clean, I believe, in Go. Especially, so let's take a real example. I was working on my small software as a service the other day, and one feature that I needed to build was kind of so if you imagine that the user can schedule some work in a calendar, or at least pick a start date and an end date, and in that interval they could say something like, what, between those dates I want to have I want to work this thing on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for example. And let me explain a little bit. So it's a software for parents that are doing homeschool. So I did homeschool with my kids, with my wife, for about 16 years and whatnot. So they are both in college today. So I think we haven't messed them up too much, but that's another topic. So the software helps to so let's say that you want your kids to do or to read a book, for example. So you could say something in the software. I want from September 1st to November, whatever, 20. I want them to read this book, and this book have, or as, I don't know how to say that, as, I don't know, 225 pages. So the goal of that feature is to split that evenly into the days that they want this work to happen. So that is, to me, so before I implemented anything like that, so of course you do have a good idea of how to do that. You have kind of the general design in your head. This is a perfect candidate for test-driven development, in my opinion, because there's not much surprises. It's fairly simple. There's no real integration. It's just basically a good old testing of a couple of functions that are almost, I would say, yeah, they are almost pure. So it's similar to a little bit like what you would do in a functional programming, meaning that this function, let's say we have a function that accepts a date range and an arbitrary number of thing to split into some days of the week that are checked. So whatever, no matter how much you would call this function, if you have the same parameter always, it will always return you the same thing. So in my opinion, this is the essence of a pure function. But those functions are extremely simple to test, because this is the very own definition of what a unit test is. It will not involve anything else, no call to anything, no external call, no database call, no API calls. So there is nothing basically. It's not doing any I/O as well. It's doing nothing. So that is not where the problem lies with me and the test in general, of course. So those things tend to be fairly easy to test. I'm sure we all agree about that. Generally, yeah, and it's up to you. Are you using a third-party library to help with the assertion and whatnot? We are not even talking about that. This is irrelevant if you want to use something like testify assert, for example, or just the standard library. It does not matter. The things that I'm trying to say, or at least the problem that I have, that I'm trying to see if anyone else has that as well, is not that. That is good. That is nice. I really love that. I don't want any AI to generate those tests. Those tests are fun to write because that function is simple. I know exactly what it should do. So my tests are extremely easy to write. So in this particular example, what I did was simply create one test and having a table of values with multiple different values from start date, end date, and the days of week that are there and the amount of things. So, and it was very easy because even though it was greatly tested, in my opinion, there were 2 bugs in production. Can you imagine that? It's crazy. There were 2 bugs that occur, and this is what I like about those kind of tests. When you do have some quick way to just add new values to a kind of a table test, if you will. So I just have those values because I was logging them. So when the issue occurred, so it was pretty easy to just plug that. So that to me is great. So this is where I don't have any issues. I think that this test in the long run I will not hate at that test. Everyone can understand it. It's pretty clear, pretty nice. It did not really involve any stubbing or any interface or anything. So this is great. Where I'm starting to have more issues is, well, you are seeing me coming with that, of course, as soon as we have integration. So any integration test, and even worse, end-to-end test, to me, ultimately, and when I say ultimately, it's after a lot of years. Let's say you have your system and it's running for 3, 4, 5 years. The amount of, maybe not weird decision, but the amount of workaround that programmers are doing in those kind of tests makes them kind of difficult to maintain, because at the end of the day, we have now two code bases to maintain. You have your test and you have your production code. It's extremely difficult. Or it's just me. I don't know. I mean, in my case, I don't know about you. Me, it's extremely difficult to be satisfied of that kind of integration test and end-to-end test after a long run, because what will happen inevitably you will have some problem with your production system, and you don't have the time, or you cannot. Well, this is not an excuse. You just don't take the time to work around or to fix your tests, and now your system isn't properly tested anymore. So that is great that the unit test is kind of easy to do. I would really enjoy to be able myself to write integration tests and end-to-end tests that I know that will live with the system solidly, if I can say that, because at some point you will have a skip, or you will have a test that is commented and things like that. There is so many things that people can do to an integration test or to an end-to-end test just to have the sweet pass, if you will. And now you cannot really trust your test anymore. This is sad, because it's pretty hard. It's just hard to build good system, in my opinion. And if you take your time, this is all the problem. So often we just don't take that time, or we take it initially a little bit just to feel probably better, and see that we have some coverage at some point. I remember when I was building Static Backend. So Static Backend was an open source project I did. It was kind of, in my mind, it was kind of Firebase a little bit, just the part where you can kind of easily have authentication and have some kind of data store that is a little bit object based and things like that. It launched at the same time as Supabase, approximately. I did some tests, because there were not much unit tests to be created for that. It was kind of, it was not really a library, although at the end you could import that into a Go project, but it was more like a small system that you would host yourself. So basically you had an API, and that thing was able to talk to all sort of database. There were a lot of integration tests and end-to-end tests for that, because there were none. It's an API. What do you want to do? At the end of the day, I wanted to test the real thing, and I remember having I duplicated my test for the database because it was kind of crazy. It was handling for data store, so PostgreSQL. It was handling MongoDB and SQLite as well, and in-memory provider. And when you are handling two different type of databases, so a RDBMS like Postgres and a document database like Mongo isn't the same thing at all. So you can, it's hard to have one suite of tests to be able to test those things, because they are very, very different. But at the end of the day, I was not pleased at all with my test, because I duplicated them for all the providers. And but not only that, I mean, all the tests for the API, I don't know how to explain myself. It's not very clear. But I feel like, I don't know, is the AI going to build those tests? Because let's face it, they are not fun to write compared to a unit test. Integration test might not be great. When I say integration test, I'm not talking for just mocking a service. So let's say you have a service to call and you want to test your code. Well, okay, this service might respond with a success respond or a failure. So what will your code do? I'm not talking about that, because that is extremely simple. I'm talking about, you want to also test you want to do I/O. You really want to test the entire thing to see how the system is going to work together, because it's good to have unit tests, and as much as you can do, this is the best way to test a system. But it's almost impossible to just have unit tests in my experience. Or at least maybe it's the way I'm designing my application. I don't know, but yes, exactly. So this is a tough one. So I'm not sure. I haven't used AI much, to be frank, so far, to create tests. And well, I'm not using AI much, especially not in my editor. But I ask a couple of questions here and there on the web, for example. But I've seen that it seems to be capable of creating some meaningful tests. Well, maybe not meaningful. I'm not sure I would go as far, but let's say decent enough tests that it could be a good start. I don't know. So I'm debating myself. Maybe maybe the AI could be good at creating those integration and end-to-end tests, if they are able to maintain the test as well. That's the part I'm not sure that they can do. So because that is the difficulty when you have to change your system. It's so easy to just not fix the test, and often it's not really fix the test. It's not because they are not passing anymore. There is they are just broken, or they don't work anymore because you have changed maybe the contract that one part of your system had with the other. And when you are not in a microservice deployment, you can do that, because if you are in a monolith, it's pretty easy to just say, okay, you know what, this piece here was wanting to have this struct, but now we will change that, etc. So you don't have the same respect, quote unquote respect for the caller in a monolith than in a microservice or in any kind of if you are just maintaining an API, Um, that is not really what I'm talking about as well. So, testing an API is almost like doing unit tests at the end of the day, because you could, well, yes, you could test your handler directly with the HTTP test package and things like that. Yeah, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. But the point is, I believe that I'm kind of afraid of those tests. It just takes so much discipline to write meaningful tests. So what people are meaning by saying meaningful tests is that at some point, if you trust the test and you know that your system is working because your test passes, it's because you are trusting them to do mostly what a real user would do with your system. And a user could be another system, or it could be a real human and things like that. I mean, so this is the challenge. I feel like, I'm doing programming for a long time now. I feel like I mastered the unit test now after, I don't know, 25 years, whatever. Not sure. I am not sure I have mastered the integration and end-to-end test, to be frank. And integration a little bit, because in Go especially, you can have some interface and try to replicate a couple of things, the internal services but that's not, at some point you will have to test your system in. And it's not everyone that have a, it's not all companies that do have a QA department and UAT and things like that. I mean, you still, it depends. Of course, if you have a couple of gated way to reach production, might be less important to create those kind of end-to-end tests. If your company thinks that having real user on a system is better, and arguably this is still very valuable in my opinion, because just because what I was saying, I mean, at some point it's like those tests are less and less trustable compared to a unit test. That is, and maybe I haven't done enough of them, or maybe I haven't been on the right team. I don't know. It's possible. Again, this is food for thought, I think. And if the AI is going to be able to do that, this might be something that I might be willing to see if it can't work. But my fear is that it might be able to create a ton of tests, and now you are kind of overwhelmed with, I don't know, with things that might not be even worth anything to the business or to the market that you're in. Maybe not the market, but just the domain that you're trying to solve. So this is another topic that I think is fitting well with what I am trying to say, is that sometimes having end-to-end tests or integration tests that do not even matter to the domain that you are doing might not be, we don't need 100% coverage for a system. It might be even better to just focus and try to do the things that really matters really well, and just does not, not having to worry too much about things that can break, and it would not be dramatic if it's going to it's going to mean that you will have difficulties building great tests or trustable tests, maybe it's worth to evaluate. I just don't know. It's a problem that I have. I'm not sure. I'm saying that to all of you, feeling a little bit vulnerable, maybe. I'm just a programmer at the end of the day. I'm just a software engineer that tries to be better at what I'm doing. I'm also coming from a world where there was just no tests. So I started back in 1998 with Visual Basic 6 actually, and there were no tests at all in that suite. In that Microsoft tool and that language. Maybe there were some kind of third-party, program or things like that you could test in your code, but I was not aware of that. No, the company that I was working for did not have any tests whatsoever. And as the time passed, at some point in 2001, I think .NET was released, and test was starting to make its way to code bases, but not that much. It took some time to to be popular. Well, at least where I am in the part of the world where I am in Quebec, Canada. Well, at least in the companies that I've worked at the beginning of my career, there was just no test. So it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard when you do have some old old ways of doing things. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that tests are not worth it. This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it seems to be extremely difficult to. I have yet to hear a software engineer say that they are fully trusting their test. It seems like to be a common acknowledgeable. Everyone agree that this part of software engineering seems to we might not have completely mastered that yet. Potentially it seems to be problematic everywhere, or at least the 80-20 rules. So 80%, I would go as far as saying that 80% of the companies at least one software engineer in a team does not really trust the test. I don't know, who am I to say the numbers like that? It's not meaningful at all. It's just that this is what I've seen so far everywhere on internet. I think that's it. That's it for the first episode of the returning Go podcast. So I will try to think a little bit about where I will go with the pod, and as always, if you can share and reach out if you want to be a guest, or connect me with someone that that would be interested in coming. That would be fantastic. All right, see you next week. All right, that's it for this week. I would really appreciate if you can talk or share about this podcast. It's always helpful. Also, another way to support this show is by purchasing my course. There's always a link in the show notes. So on that, see you next week.